What's a really fucked up thing you've witnessed as a kid but didn't realize it was until you were older? My mother was a drug addict. As a kid lots of things happened as a result of it, but one thing I didn't realize at the time that would stick with me, well probably forever, but at least thus far, is when my sister's childhood best friend's father committed suicide, and my mother brought my sister and I to their house a couple nights later, the funeral hadn't even happened yet, to break in and steal things to sell for drug money. She said at the time that she had permission to do so. She didn't. She just wanted to rob a dead man, and brought us along to help carry things. I still feel guilty about it. When I was a kid, all the kids would sleep in the basement on Christmas Eve to give space for Santa to drop off the presents. That night there was a lot of noise coming from outside on the street, but we couldn't see anything because there was snow covering the egress windows. My mom came downstairs and told us to stay there. But soon we heard sirens and saw police lights reflecting in the snow. There was a lot of commotion that we couldn't see. Then my dad came downstairs with the very real Santa Claus. He told us that his sleigh crashed in the snow and that the kind police officers were helping him get unstuck, and while they were working he was visiting the kids in the neighborhood. He pulled out a present for each of us and sat with my family while we opened them and sang a few Christmas songs. When things calmed down outside he went back to delivering toys. Years later I learned that there was a large gang fight outside of our house and that a few people died right outside. An older man from our church lived down the road, and knowing my parents had undoubtedly scared children at home, put on his Santa suit and came over once the police arrived. Santa was a hero to me as a child, but that man is a hero to me now. When I was around 6 or 7 my dad was poor as fuck and lived in these really shitty apartments where most of the tenants were on drugs. I had to go stay with him on the weekends, and sometimes we'd visit his friend downstairs, who had a 13 or 14-year-old daughter they'd stick me with. On this particular day she had a friend over, and her friend was telling this story about purposefully drowning her little brother and then pretending to be broken up about it on the news like she had nothing to do with it. Laughing about how stupid her mom was for believing her. It did scare me at the time because I was scared of her in general due to how mean/erratic she was, but I thought it was a joke. In retrospect I really do think this girl may have drowned her brother. When I was 6, or maybe 7, it was around my birthday, I saw a girl get hit by a car. We lived in a small town where the elementary, middle, and high schools were all together, so all grade levels rode the buses together and all the buses had to go down the same road to get to the school. The bus in front of mine stopped so a girl could cross the street and get on. I watched her start to cross the street, I watched the car come over the hill, slide on the stones, it was a dirt road, I watched it hit her body, and I watched the blood sink into the dirt. Her backpack came open and her shoes came off. One landed near my window. It wasn't until after the police had gotten there and were covering up her body that one of the older kids noticed me watching and moved me to the other side where I couldn't see. I never mentioned that I saw it to anyone and just moved on. Like 10 years later in a forensics class we were talking about car accidents and it sorta brought the whole thing to the surface. Lived in a townhouse. In my bedroom at night I would hear the kids next door scream and cry. My parents called the police once, but the man claimed he was playing with his kids and didn't let them in, and apparently the police couldn't do anything. Found out when I was older that the man had later tried to kill the whole family, kids, baby included, with a pair of scissors. I saw a small child being smothered under a sort of beanbag/giant soft play thing. Face down in an indoor play area sandpit, other very small children were all playing and jumping on it without realizing someone was under it, myself included. I was about 5 and the rest of the children were the same age or younger. After some time an adult noticed and pulled him out unconscious. A woman was screaming, presumably the mother, and I remember the kid being worked on by a doctor or paramedic, I'm guessing. I remember my dad asking me very calmly if I saw what happened. I'm actually too afraid to bring this up with my parents because I have no idea if the kid died or not or how that might have affected them all these years, as it's never been brought up. For whatever reason it's been on my mind lately. I caught my grandmother with her hand down my cousin's pants. She had done the same sort of thing, and more, to me when I was his age. At the time, I thought I made her that way. I didn't make her that way. Grandma was a pedophile. I was in a split grade 6 and 7 class. I was in grade 7. Me, guy, and a girl from grade 6 were helping out on a track and field day. A bunch of girls were racing around the track when our teacher came up to me, with a big, dopey grin on his face and said, laughing, "I like to watch the big girls run, be a bump, be a bump, be a bump." He turned red-faced. I just looked at him, and then saw my grade 6 classmate behind him. I think she heard, but she had no response either. Neither of us really understood. We were both very naive goody two-shoes. Of course, I later understood that's exactly why he felt he could say that in front of us. We were not capable of responding appropriately. Now I feel disgusted thinking of that pig teacher. My mom used to sleep with dudes while I was in the same bed as her. Never really clicked till I got older. Let's say my therapist isn't a fan of my mother at all. My mother's second husband coming into my room and running his hand up my leg slowly, then suddenly standing up and walking out. Then after he was kicked out, coming to my school bus stop, I was the only one who got on there, and acting really weird. Realized a few years ago, guy was trying to molest me and almost kidnapped me. When I was 9 or 10, my family and I lived on the first floor of an apartment complex in Colorado. That year we have a particularly snowy winter. Every day following snow, 2-3x per week, the groundskeeper for the complex would make his rounds, cheerily using a snowblower to clear each and every path. I'd wave hi whenever I saw him pass by my bedroom window. After one especially heavy snowfall, the groundskeeper was walking along clearing snow when, just outside my room, when something got caught and obstructed the snowblower. I saw him struggle with the machine for a moment, then walk in front of it. He bent over to look, and when he reached his hand in, a splattering of blood hit my window with such force that I'll never forget the sound. We called 911, but his hand was gone. Luckily it was just his hand. He left the job shortly after and I never saw him again, but I'll never forget the sound of the blood hitting my window. Cross-posting this comment from another question last year that was similar. My mom would sometimes have us play a game called Army, which consisted of me, my mom, and my siblings army crawling around our apartment. Kind of a hide-and-seek style game. She would yell, "Hit the deck," randomly, and we would all drop and find a hiding spot. We would giggle and giggle while my mom army crawled around looking for us. We loved the game so much. I realized a few years ago while retelling the story that we lived in a really terrible neighborhood, and she would yell it out when she heard gunshots outside the building. I'm assuming she was worried about stray bullets. Living in an abusive situation as a whole. As a child, domestic violence was the norm for me. When I was at a friend from elementary school one time and his parents were having a disagreement over something. I asked my friend when they'd start hitting each other, and he just looked at me funny, not getting what I meant. As an adult, looking back on my childhood, it's only then you really understand how fucked up it all was. As a child it's intense and frightening, but you don't yet grasp the full situation yet. Staying up waking my dad when he would stop breathing. Later realizing he was overdosing on opiates. My parents fighting. Whoever was losing would say to me, "I'm going to run away and kill/drown myself if Mummy/Daddy don't stop shouting. I can't take it anymore," and then proceed to leave the house. They're both still alive, and in hindsight I don't know if they ever meant what they said, but now I'm about to have a child of my own. I can't ever imagine doing that to a child, let alone my own child. My friend had a lock on the outside of her bedroom door. I thought it was weird but didn't really think much about it. It turned out her parents would literally lock her in her room for long periods of time as punishment. I watched my friend try to murder his older brother. They were constantly fighting with each other, and I knew their father was a drinker and would hit them, so it was a rough environment they grew up in. One day a group of us were at their house alone, no parents. They start fighting and one of them pushes the other through a glass pane door, shattering it. This sets them off to real fighting, and my friend grabbed a kitchen knife and then tackled his brother. He jammed the knife downwards towards his brother's face with all his body weight, and the older brother was barely holding him up. Luckily he was able to shove him to the side and wrestle away the knife. My friends and I were stupidly laughing and were like, damn, they're really going at it. Even then I knew it was crazy, but I grew up in an unstable home myself, so it didn't affect me much. Years later, I shudder to think what could have happened. As a kid coming back from Halloween Horror Nights real late at night, I'd just stare out the window the whole ride home. I saw a truck with the windshield smashed completely out and a man sitting very stiff and unnatural in front of it. Now when I pass that same spot, there's a memorial grave marker there, and I realize that man was probably dead or dying, got thrown through his windshield. I was once at one of those birthday parties in McDonald's, late 90s, as a young child. There was another party going on the opposite side of the restaurant, so it was pretty chaotic with kids running around everywhere and only a small amount of adults to corral them. There was a man wearing a red t-shirt and blue jeans sitting and eating kind of close to the other party, which was odd in itself because most adults that were coming in were getting their food and getting out of the noise of 20+ screaming kids as fast as possible. I only remember him because looking back on it a little while later, I saw him leaving the McDonald's with a kid from the other party. The kid wasn't struggling or anything, but the man was kind of rushing him out. In my kid brain I assumed it was his dad or whatever, but a couple days later my parents found out through mutual friends that there was an attempted kidnapping in the McDonald's we were at. I don't know if this is true, but part of me feels like I witnessed the attempting kidnapping. Thank God they caught the guy and the kid was okay, and because of that incident my parents lectured my brother and I heavily on stranger danger. My older brother overdosing, always thought it was normal. Throughout my life, I'm 20, I've saved him from dying maybe 3 times I can remember. Always put him in his side, never called the cops. All of my brothers and sister have seen it happen. If he were to die tomorrow I don't think I could cry, as I've cried too many times over his death, and he ended up living. He's still alive, currently in a sober home. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button and subscribe if you are interested in more Reddit content. See you in next video.